After almost a year after the release of Justice League, we are still getting petitions for the Snyder Cut of Justice League to be released to the public, and a lot of people have been asking, what would this film look like had Zack Snyder actually got to complete his vision rather than dealing with the personal issues which were by far more important than this film. Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Daktron here, and I'm going to be diving into exactly that and what each individual character, story beat, and everything could have looked like if Zack Snyder had finished his dream. We're going to start off with Aquaman, given that Aquaman has a solo film due out in Aquaman was a significant character going into Justice League and was a standout character of Justice League, mind you. Many of his scenes were altered due to time. Time is the biggest killer for Aquaman's story arcs. Aquaman would have had more time on screen, had more time in Atlantis, had a longer meeting with Batman, but ultimately his character would have probably stayed about the same. Like I just mentioned with Aquaman, runtime is the biggest killer of Justice League in my opinion, and likely with the Snyder Cut, the runtime would have been much longer. Take a look at films like Watchmen and Batman vs. Superman the Ultimate Edition, both of which Zack Snyder directed. They are long films, girthy films. They have almost 3-hour runtimes apiece. That's a long time to sit in the theater, but man, Justice League seems more like an event and less like a film, and I feel like Justice League should have been marketed that way, but was not. I feel like with the Snyder Cut, this probably would have become more to fruition, given that the creation of the Justice League is a very big deal. Two of the most iconic symbols and logos in history is the Superman logo and the Batman logo. Them coming together to form a team should have been the biggest thing we've ever seen, and a larger runtime was definitely necessary to capture that overall plot. I now move into Cyborg. Cyborg was an unsatisfying character in Justice League, to say the least. He just seemed like a big drag to the overall story. I mean, Joss Whedon came in and directed this thing to be a lighter film at the request of Warner Brothers. Snyder would have had many scenes, according to one account, dedicated to Cyborg finding his way to superhero status. This is very important for this film, because Cyborg really was an accident, and he needed to find his way back to being a hero. We didn't get this payoff in Justice League, and I feel like if we had it, the overall film would have been better. That's why I believe the Snyder Cut would have included the most definitive version of Cyborg we could have got from the Justice League film. This was purely just a rumor, but I believe that this was originally intended to be one of Batman's last outings as the Dark Knight. Many sources coming around Snyder say that the cut saw Bruce dealing with death, knocking at the door, as part of him wanting to die in battle to make up for the mistakes he made in Batman vs. Superman. This would have been, rather important, rather than just skipping over the whole Superman and Batman not being keen on each other. It would have shown that Clark's heroic death, taking down Doomsday, actually really got to Bruce. It made Bruce feel bad for himself and feel like he needed to prove himself in battle, which would have been a nice story arc. Now, I don't necessarily know if I agree with the suicidal tendencies, of Batman that he would be having, but it's better than us having what we had, which was just a Batman carried over from Batman vs. Superman, and taking it away and stripping it bare bones down to what we necessarily didn't like about Batman. And so I don't know if I would have enjoyed it, but it definitely would have been different, and I believe Zack Snyder could be thinking of this as the last outing of Bruce as the Dark Knight. One of my biggest gripes with Justice League is the overall color palette seems way too light for a DCEU film. The darker color palette it's seen throughout the Justice League original trailers would have been present through the whole film most likely, and opened up the film to the whole world, making it seem like the whole world was actually at stake. That's something that the red glass lightning window thing didn't really capture, and that really took me out of the film. It didn't feel like the world was actually in danger. It should have felt like that. This is Justice League. This is the biggest film they have. It felt like there were more stakes than Man of Steel, but because we were sanctioned to this little town in the middle of Russia to keep it away from people because we argued about Man of Steel, we, as fans, had put Justice League in this box and put them to actually doing the Russian thing, which wasn't right to do. I don't feel like the stakes of this movie were really high, and I believe the darker color palette making the world seem around this or invested in this would have helped the overall feel of Justice League. The Flash would have been relatively unchanged. The Flash was always intended to be the comic relief of the series, and that's exactly what he came in and did. Granted, we would have got a backstory piece to him, as well as a scene where he saves Iris West, setting up his own solo film, which we never got. And most of his arc, though, would have remained the exact same, as he proves himself as a hero. He only pushes people and runs away quickly. I feel like Wonder Woman was just there in this film. After an incredible outing in her solo film, she really struggled to stand out in Justice League for some reason, and I believe it's because it felt like she had no weight to her. And I believe the Snyder Cut would have corrected this, as we see in one of the earlier trailers. The building that's threatened to be blown up at the beginning of Justice League actually blows up. I believe that would create a sense of weight on Diana's shoulders, seeing that she needed to prove herself that she could still be a hero, and I feel like that would have been a great character piece that could have really helped her character. Because it was a dark and gritty subject, Joss Whedon cut it from the film. Superman's facial hair was a large point of contention in the overall reshooting of Justice League. Henry Cavill, of course, grew out his mustache for Mission Impossible Fallout while the reshoots were being done for Justice League. WB got into a dispute with Paramount and ultimately agreed to CGI out the mustache, and it looks terrible. It looks really bad, to be honest with you. It looks like he has a blur patch over his upper lip. Likely the whole resurrection would have been different due to this, though, because this is present literally throughout this film. I believe the Superman character as a whole got one of the biggest shifts for this film, because honestly, his reshoots are so noticeable. There are very few scenes it looks like he shot while Zack was actually there. It looks like as a whole most of his scenes were either reshot, retooled, or reworked. And man, that upper lip is just so unbearable to look at. Another thing missing from this film was the presence of Darkseid. In some cases, it was rumored that another nightmare sequence like Batman vs. Superman was likely to take place where Darkseid would be seen. In other cases, it was rumored that standing there waiting for Steppenwolf to come back home through the portal at the end would be Darkseid ready to murder him where he stands. Either way, it seemed like a fitting foot for the Lord of Apocalypse to take hold. I believe this to actually be a better film if Darkseid would have at least been seen, but of course, we never saw what Darkseid could have been. The Snyder Cut is a thing of legend, and we may never know what it actually looked like until it is released, which may never happen. Hopefully this petition works out, though, and we officially make Warner Brothers give us what we've always wanted, and that is the Justice League assembled on screen in the best way possible. And that's going to be it for me. This is going to be Daktron, myself, signing out until next time.